Well, my name is Paul Dokecki. I'm professor of psychology and special education at Peabody, and also professor, I'm appointed in the Graduate Department of Religion. I've been at Peabody, depending on how you count it, from either 1962 or 1970. Came in 1962 as a graduate student. I came back on the faculty in 1970. I guess you could call me one of the founding members of HOD, but before I talk about the founding, you got to understand some of the history of where HOD came from. One of the doctoral program is an offshoot of the community psychology program that used to be in the Department of Psychology and Human Development. Community psychology at Peabody stretches back to the 1950s. I came as a doctoral student in 1962 and pretty immediately got involved in the kind of clinical psychology that touches on community psychology. So that when I came back on the faculty in 1970, actually I was asked to come back to be the associate director for Susan Gray in her demonstration and research center for early education. And that was what I did there was a good example of how my work was turning away from working directly with people and with patients to working almost exclusively with community agencies, because Sue Gray had done research in the early 60s that gave rise to Project Head Start. Sergeant Shriver, who was the first director of the Peace Corps, always used to credit coming here. The Kennedy Center has had association with Peabody College since the 50s. Coming here, seeing Susan Gray's work, going back to Washington when he first began to direct the Office of Economic Opportunity, and say we ought to do something like that in Washington. I said before that he directed, the first director of, did I say the Peace Corps? I meant the Office of Economic Opportunity. And interestingly enough, the program that had absolutely saved Peabody's life financially, namely the Human and Organizational Development undergraduate program that Bob Ennis had started in the early 1980s. And I was part of that group that worked on that program all the way, but I was not a central person in that program. But it started as a very small program and got larger and larger and more popular and more faculty involved until as things moved into the 1990s, it was, one might even call it spectacularly successful and popular. I like to describe the success of it is that it used to admit an entering class of 100 and graduate a class of 200. Most programs worry about attrition, enter 100, graduate 50. We entered 100, graduated 200, because students came in from all over the campus, found out about the program, about the nature of the pedagogy, and came to be in the program. So when we created the new doctoral program, we called it the Doctoral Program in Community Research and Action. We couldn't use the title Community Psychology, and but by using that title, we communicated to psychologists throughout the country and the world that work that had been going on at Peabody in community psychology for all those years hadn't gone away. So we therefore had a pyramidal structure in our department. We had a base with the undergraduate program, we had a master's program in human development counseling, and within 2 years we had a master's program that was a downward extension of the doctoral program, a master's program in community development action, and then the smaller doctoral program in community research and action. And so that is the current structure of the department. It was established that way essentially in the year 2000. My work all along, back when I was a community psychologist interested in early childhood education, my interdisciplinary work was developmental psychology, educational psychology, cultural psychology, because we were working with low-income children from various cultures. I had always been active in the Catholic Church as a layperson, and I mean very active. I'd been on the board of the National Catholic Education Association, but I had never been able to get my church interests together with my academic interests. They were always separate. In the 1980s, my colleague Bob Newborough, who I mentioned, and a colleague of ours, Bob O'Gorman, who was a theologian at Loyola University in Chicago, we got together in a project, a community development project in Nashville, in which we were trying to help a particular Catholic parish be more and more community-like and function as a community promoting human development. And that work went on for 20 years. In the HOD book, I'm working on 2 chapters. One chapter was mostly the result of the past 25 years of teaching of ethics I've been doing at Peabody. I had a number of takes on what professional ethics and ethics ought to be like, and I have labeled my theory of ethics, the ethics of human development and community, suggesting that what our ethical task ought to be is to promote the human development of people and to promote community environments. And that is the basis for the ethical teaching I've been doing in the HOD undergraduate program since the 1980s. And then when we started the HOD department and had the CRA doctoral program, the Community Research and Action doctoral program, I was also teaching ethics in that program. And along the way, the kind of teaching I do, I make sure I learn a lot from what my students know. So I've learned a lot from my students about ethics. So I had my own initial take on ethics and the take that my students have given to me, and I've tried to put that together in a pretty succinct form, and described it as the ethical position or outlook of the department, which is maybe a little bit of a stretch in claiming that, but on the other hand, I had gotten so much of it from my students and colleagues, I think I could claim that a lot of what this theory was all about came from the department. So now several colleagues and I are taking that theory, updating it, and trying to put it in the context of the book to try to make it even more relevant to when HOD people at all levels engage in the community, which all of them in one way or another do, what should be the ethical principles that guide their actions in the community. So that's the ethics chapter. The other chapter kind of picks up on my interest in religion. 3 years ago, a doctoral student entered the program from the Divinity School, Mark McCormick. In his case, he is a member of the Methodist Church, so we had conversations about how Methodist and Catholic takes on the church as an institution might inform each other or relate to each other. And 2 years ago, we recruited a student by the name of Hasina Mohudin, who is a Muslim, a practicing Muslim, very, very active in the Muslim community here in Nashville. Also has a bachelor's degree in economics from Yale and an MBA from Vanderbilt, in addition to being a Muslim, and now one of our doctoral students. We were all three interested in the church as an institution. So we're in the process of studying interfaith organizations across the country, and this chapter will be an attempt to put together our conceptualization and initial research findings. And the twist on our doing that is that the three of us, and as well as a fourth author, Linda Isaacs, of that chapter, looked at each other and said, hey, we're an interfaith group. So what about we study ourselves as an interfaith group that's studying other interfaith groups? So we're trying to kind of get that to kind of come together, and that then would be the second chapter in the volume. So I want to continue developing my theory of the ethics of human development and community, which, you know, it in many ways is the theory of the department, and it's been the work I've been doing over the years. So it's a natural extension of what I've been doing over the years, and I'm just pleased to be able to continue my passion after I'm retired. As a founder of the doctoral program and as its current director, I would like to see that program, like that to be my legacy, not that, oh, he did it then and it was great, but that in 15 years it is even greater.